Hello, Brad here, just to say we're super proud that the Friday 5pm podcast is sponsored by the Malt Miller, the UK's best home brew store.
We use the Malt Miller for all of our homebrew experiments, as well as tapping them up for advice and binging on their awesome YouTube channel all the time.
That's why whenever we release a homebrew video, we put a recipe kit live on the Malt Miller, so you can brew with the exact same amazing ingredients that we did. The same ingredients used by pro brewers.
So alongside the Malt Miller's nitro-flushed hops, cold-stored yeast and milled-to-order malts, you can pick up recipe kits for our 5 Points Best Bitter, Russian River West Coast IPA, and now the fastest beer in the world, a hazy session IPA that goes from grain to glass in less than 48 hours.
Sign up to their newsletter at tinyurl.com/Malt Miller to get 5% off your first order. With the Malt Miller's amazing customer service and Johnny's 48-hour recipe, you could order the ingredients on a Monday and be drinking the beer by the weekend.
Speaking of which, it's Friday.
It's 5pm.
So enjoy this week's Friday 5pm podcast. Good afternoon, Beer Geeks. It's Friday, it's 5pm, and I can now open my mouth wide enough to welcome you to the podcast.
Amazing, Johnny. So good to hear you talking again. The world has been a quieter place without it, that's for sure.
I think definitely my house has. I'm still on the soup diet.
Nice.
But I'm also back on the beer diet. And I had to be because we were doing a hell of a lot of filming this week.
Yeah, soup and beer, what a combo. What an absolute liquid love affair.
It does mean that, because we've talked about this on the podcast before, how I barely drink any water. So I'm probably more hydrated than I've ever been.
I guess, yeah, soup's got liquid in it. It is basically water-based, isn't it? So
there you go. You heard it here first. Soup's got liquid in.
There you go.
There's your first insight. We're barely a minute in, and we're blowing people's minds here.
I know, right? On the daily, that's what we get. That's what we do, Johnny.
Well, it was actually our turn to have our minds blown this week with the breweries that we visited. Should we start by talking about Hook Norton, which was just it was magical. Definitely
one of the most special brewing experiences I've ever been involved in. Like a fairy tale castle, if I had to describe it. It's kind of insane looking, but beautiful, and like a mad Victorian, castle looking thing with giant overgrown horses, and just everything's made of copper and brass and steamy and beautiful and wood.
So much wood.
Oh, Johnny, what a spectacular place. What lovely people. What great beer.
And yeah, we talk about it in the video that we've made about how having a beautiful location and a sense of tradition and history can lead to having really interesting and kind people working there, because they're the kind of people that really care for this kind of stuff. And then also as a result, you end up with brilliant product as well, because they really care about that. And I think I didn't grow up a million miles away from Hook Norton, and when I was in my teens and just getting into beer, I drank a fair amount of hooky, and I never ever really appreciated just how historic and how culturally vital it kind of was, not just to the area of Hook Norton where I grew up near Oxford, but just in terms of being a literal time capsule. Like inside that building there are things that have not changed, and somebody who's never seen that side, like maybe an American beer geek, or maybe just somebody that's got into craft and never really loved beer before and never really been into cask ale, they'll walk into there and be like, this is like going back in time. I've never seen anything like this. It's
amazing. It's been there 172 years. Like,
yeah,
that's insane.
And on that site from 1899 they started building it. So lots of the stuff in there is still, the building itself is 120 years, and lots of the equipment in there is still 120 years old and still working, which is the other big difference between lots of other historic breweries have kept that stuff, but they're not using it anymore. Like Fuller's have the original copper, but it's not being used, and Harvey's a sort of a mix between like beautiful new stainless stuff and amazing historic stuff, whereas Hook Norton, the brew that they did when we were there everything went through the original equipment, the original mash tun, the original copper, and it went into an original, what would have been slate, but was now steel lined square fermenter, open. It just, there's nowhere else in the world, I think, where that's really happening. Maybe the Czech Republic and a couple of places in like Bamberg and bits like that, but that level of history, that 120, 170 years, is mostly gone now.
Yeah, it's. I mean, honestly, it's one of the most beautiful, incredible places I've been to on my journey into beer. Just a phenomenal thing to be involved with, and that'll be coming in the next month or so, won't it, to the Craft Beer Channel in a sort of top secret project we're working towards.
Yeah, just over a month that episode will go live, and we sort of delve into the history of it and chat to what would he be, fifth generation, I think George was, about both the history of it and the future. So like they've got this giant, beautiful, cool ship at the top of the brewery that they might want to start using again, and they really understand the incredible gift they have, and they want to do their best with it. So lots of exciting stuff coming out of Hook Norton, and lots of exciting stuff for the video as well. We were there on Tuesday, and Wednesday morning we hitched a lift with the Shire horses, which was another unbelievable experience. And then after that we went to pretty much the opposite of Hook Norton, which is an hour drive away, to DEYA Brewing. Yeah,
I mean, you couldn't get much more different, really, in terms of a brewery experience. We're talking the hippest, trendiest, freshest, shiniest brewery I've been to in quite some time. It's a beautiful place, and the beers were tasting incredible, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean they've gone from strength to strength. Like, they've always been consistent and always had really delicious beers, particularly Steady Rolling Man. But they gave us some beer to take away, and I drank a couple of them last night. And each one, sometimes you get a bit of beer fatigue, and you crack open a beer and you get halfway down and you're like, oh, I'm not really enjoying this. I wish I hadn't cracked it, or maybe it's not that good. Just all three beers that I had last night, I demolished. Absolutely loved every second of them. And while we were there, we had magazine cover, which was unbelievable. So crisp, but so much aroma. Just beautifully made. The attention to detail is incredible. I think DEYA are definitely one of those breweries that we're lucky to have in the UK. The kind of places we used to look over to the States with envy, and now we've got one in Cheltenham, a world class big brewery.
Yeah,
they're making a lot of beer now, and they're doing it incredibly well. And that was the thing that we didn't have. Every time a brewery got big, it would the quality would tend to decline. We've seen it a bit with Brewdog. We've seen it with Meantime. We've seen it with Beavertown. Although I hear Beavertown is sorting their issues out, but I mean, we're not touching that because of Heineken now. But even before the Heineken Association, the beer was dropping off a cliff. And I think Thornbridge were the only guys that were probably big and relentless quality. And now we have DEYA, and it's very exciting. And that's part of what the video is about. But also we were there because I brewed a collaboration with them to help release my book, which comes out on the 27th of September. So we're putting together a 4-pack of beer that will be released with the book. So the book's all about seasonality, and then there's going to be 4 beers, one for each season. And DEYA brewed spring, so we've got a West Coast double IPA coming your way. I think I can tell you that.
You just did.
Yeah, I can tell you that.
You just did, John.
Yeah, I just did. I could edit it out, Brad. The magic of pods.
I would keep it. I think it's a nice little exclusive there, Johnny, for anyone listening that wants to act on that 4-pack as soon as it comes out.
Yeah, there you go. Don't pre-order your beer yet until the pre-orders for the beers go live too. And we'll also be doing an event at DEYA as well. I don't know whether Brad will be joining me yet. We need to work that out. But there will be an event, possibly with lots of cheese, lots of beer, and hopefully lots of book sales. So you guys will be the first to know about that. But yes, we have a video in which we chat to Gareth, the head brewer, and Theo, the founder. Not just about the beer that we brewed, but the changes that have happened at DEYA, because it's pretty incredible. And going back to the original site, which is just around the corner, which is now their barrel room, and they're hoping to, I think, reopen it as like the wild fermentation tap room. I mean, the contrast is unreal, and how far they've come so quickly. They've just done an incredible job, the whole team.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been anywhere that's grown that fast and that well in quite some time. And like you say, I've never actually been to DEYA before, so it was kind of quite amazing and humbling to see that first unit that they came from, the scale of it. And it was a lovely intimate space that they've now obviously put over to barrel stuff. But the new space is just phenomenal, and I was blown away by it all, Johnny. I mean, I was already blown away by the beer, but having sort of seen where they're making the beer now has just made me even more excited about the future of DEYA.
It's an interesting thing. Sometimes you go to a brewery that you love the beer of, and you sort of look around and you go, you make that here? Really?
Yeah.
And sometimes you go to a brewery and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. DEYA looks exactly like you'd expect it, like spotless, big, airy. Fresh is quite a good word for it. There's lots of plants, lots of white walls, and beautiful artwork from their artist who does everything. It's just it's sort of a mirror image of the cans and the beer that's inside. Whereas then you go to, I don't know, like to some extent like Verdant back at their old place, Little Blue they called it, their Little Blue warehouse. You'd walk in and go like, I thought you guys were bigger than this. And it just didn't make any sense that much noise and that much excitement and that much delicious beer could come out of just what was probably just really a really big shipping container, basically. Obviously the Verdant place is huge.
Yeah, that's the magic of beer, though, isn't it? Sometimes these guys can start off with something quite humble and still produce world-class beer, and that allows them to catapult themselves to the stratosphere. So I think it's just shows the opportunity in beer and in the market still. If you can elevate yourself above the noise, then you can dream big, and it's like Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams when he's got the weird whispering voices that tell him if you build it, they will come. It's just like that, Johnny, but with a giant, beautiful, shiny brewery.
There it is. Right, so despite being on the road, we did just about manage to squeeze a video out. I just got home from that trip, went into the house and thought, I'll settle in now, relax, maybe take some paracetamol. And then I realised the video hadn't gone live. I'd literally just forgotten to click the button.
Oh dear. You had a Kevin's mum from Home Alone moment. And you were just like, the video!
The video! Yeah. Yep. So yeah, apologies to anybody that was, we've tried to build this thing where people will be like, hey, it's Wednesday, it's Craft Beer Channel Video Day. But clearly that hasn't worked on me, because I got up on a Wednesday and just went, it's just another day. So that went live on Thursday at 4 p.m. instead. And that was another homebrew video which we shot at Malt Miller when I was making those films for camera. All about homebrewing with Andy Parker of Elusive. And this one was all about the boil, which is definitely the most simple process in the whole brewing process. I mean, certainly compared to mashing and fermentation are just chemical works of wonder of nature and chemical complexity. And the boil obviously has lots of chemical stuff going on, but there's only so much you can really influence it. But there's some great tips in there, I think, particularly if you're confused by all the different hop products that are out there now, like Spectrum, Incognito, T90s, T45s, Cryo, all this kind of stuff. There's lots of information in there to explain what they are and what they're best used for, as well as some tips around getting the best from your boil and getting bitterness right and stuff like that. So yeah, did you see any comments from that video that you liked?
No, I was just thinking about T90 though. I was thinking, is that the name of a Terminator robot? But I've just Googled it and it's a Russian tank, which is still pretty beefy, but it's not a Terminator robot. In terms of comments for the video, I just like the fact that people are using them when they're brewing and they're watching them as they're boiling. So we had a comment from Matt McLeary. It says, "Watching this as I'm boiling right now. Thanks for the tips." I think these are great videos, man. That are just over time. Hopefully, they're just going to be a massive resource for home brewing. And Andy's just such a font of knowledge, so it's just great to get him on camera and geek out, man.
Yeah, and it's what I love about Andy and Andy's book as well is he is a fountain of knowledge, but also he's a fountain of knowledge that understands homebrewers. So there's so many breweries now that we go for homebrew tips, and that they haven't done a homebrew in a decade, 20 years, 30 years. Whereas Andy, what was it? 2017, I think he founded Elusive. So in 2016, he was still a bathtub brewer. He was still using a hacked mash tun, a copper on his hob kind of vibe. So it's he completely understands that they're very different challenges on a very small scale, and that very tiny errors can result in a completely ruined batch, and he understands how to fix that and also the frustrations of it. So all the information that he's giving is kind of he understands that you're not going to get the absolute best process down, I think. And sometimes when I've spoken to brewers, they're like, "Oh yeah, just if you're adding the hops, you've got to purge the headspace, you've got to bubble CO2 up through it." And we've done that in our videos to see if we can do it. But it's like they just go, "Oh, just do that." And you're like, with my plastic bucket and my soda stream CO2, and it's not a sealed container. So yeah, that's why I love what Andy does. I think he's a brilliant communicator / influencer for the home brewers.
Yeah, man, that's the difference, right? He's like the missing link from home brewing to full scale commercial brewing. So he can see sort of both sides of the coin, and doesn't look down on it or anything. I think it's just brilliant that he's so enthusiastic about it. It's awesome.
Yeah, and he's always got time as well. Like you can just tweet him with a homebrew question, and he'll get back to you eventually. He loves talking about it still. So my comment for this week doesn't come from this week's video. It actually comes from a video we made during lockdown, which was when I tasted West Veteran 12. We thought it was 5 years old. It's actually 3 years old. So apologies for that. But it's one of those wonderful comments where you're not entirely sure if it's a troll, but somebody took serious exception to something I said, and that someone was Bill. And he quotes me in his comment saying, where I say, if you're not looking for profit, you tend to put more care into the actual product. And then he says, "What utter shit." Which is it's a cutting comment, but it's a simple comment. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because, firstly, I stand by that comment entirely. And the reason that I stand by it entirely is mostly because of the context of the video. So yes, there could easily be an argument that if you're not actually making any profit from it, you might do the opposite. You might not really care. You might be like, well, this isn't a commercial business. People are doing it to support whatever foundation or whatever it is, so it doesn't need to be perfect. But with particular reference to beer and particular reference to the Trappist beers, and my reply to him was that, beer is an industry that was entirely ruined by profiteering, race to the bottom pricing, squeezing of margins, and compromising a product in the pursuit of pure profit and margin. So for me to sit there and drink a beer made by a brewery significantly older than most of these macro breweries, and using ingredients and knowledge that's come from breweries that are centuries old and have never made a dime of profit, does show, and these beers that beer is regarded as the best in the world by some people. So clearly there is a link. If you're not trying to run a very profitable commercial business, if you're just looking to raise money for your certain causes, then there is the possibility for you to care more about the actual product, to take more time over it, to make more investments into its production, and to not scale production to the point where you're making huge compromises in the pursuit of margin. So, Bill, I think you're talking utter shit.
Oof. Fight, fight, fight.
Here ends my fighty TED Talk.
Yes. I mean, yeah, I agree with you, mate. I think he's just too... you can't look at it like that, because that's how you get to the bottom. We're all about getting to the top, making the best of the best.
And yeah, like nothing in the world is black and white, and obviously there's exceptions to what I said, but to just dismiss it as utter shit, I think is deeply unhelpful. And I thoroughly enjoyed replying. I hope he comes back to me. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. The trolls don't generally come back a second time. Right, moving on to our question for the week. I said that like there was going to be a jingle, and now I wish there was one. So this week's question is not a recorded question, it's a written question, and it's a long written question. He's asked two questions, and we're going to start with the second question because it's strangely timely, and we'll save his even longer, more in-depth question for next week. There's a couple of typos in this, so excuse me if I get this wrong. When isn't an American IPA one of a West Coast IPA, New England IPA, or Mountain IPA? Is an East Coast IPA different to a New England IPA? If so, what makes it different? It continues, should the I stand for India if it's not British/English IPA? So much to unpack. And then naming shouldn't annoy me, but it does feel like the US versions and Pacific versions should be Imperial Pale Ales, then Dipper, Tipper, while British versions stay as India Pale Ale. Not that we can ever change it, as breweries seem to classify beers as whatever they like. Yes, they do seem to do that. But let's break it down, because basically the reason I wanted to bring this up is there's a really interesting new article that just went live on Good Beer Hunting, all about the murky, unethical, sort of darker side, not just of India Pale Ale and the history of it and its associations with, the atrocities of the British Empire, but also the complications of using that term in the modern world. So I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes. And the guy that wrote it for Good Beer Hunting is called David Jesudason. I hope I pronounced that right. And it's an amazing article. It's really brilliant, really interesting. He's got lots of beer historians, but also some modern brewers who talk about it as well. So yeah, I thought that if this question interests you, it would be a great thing to read. But basically, an American IPA, the way I see it, and maybe Brad will disagree, I don't know. An American IPA is an IPA made with American hops. So it's a catch-all for West Coast, New England IPA, Mountain IPA, probably sour IPAs, probably session IPAs. It's not a style, it's like distinguishing it from an English hopped IPA. Is that reasonable, Brad?
That is reasonable. I would say that's very reasonable. The reason why we're kind of obsessed with American IPAs these days is because the hops are so amazing and different to what we kind of traditionally use for IPAs over here. So I think that's a totally fair comment.
Cool, good. So that's the first part of the question. The second bit was, is an East Coast different to a New England IPA? So East Coast IPA used to be seen as slightly more British influenced than the stuff that was happening on the West Coast back in the sort of the 90s and 2000s. So the classic example of an East Coast IPA, even though it's from Chicago, would have been Goose Island IPA, because it wasn't crazily hoppy. It had lots of malt character. It might even have some English hops in, possibly Goose Island. I can't quite remember now. But so it was more based on the recipes that these brewers were digging out back then that were, English IPA recipes. Whereas the West Coast were using big American hops, dialing back their yeast character, making their malt bills really simple to try and just sing about the hops. There's not many sort of East Coast style IPAs really made anymore, and that style name has kind of just disappeared as a result, because now it's all West Coast or New England IPA. basically, or mountain IPA if you consider that a style. So yeah, East Coast was different, but it's not really anymore. Should the I stand for India if it's not a British English IPA? So that's where we'd get into the complexities of this article. But I do think, an imperial pale ale. It's interesting. So imperial, the history of it is imperial became the word for the strongest version of that style that a brewery made back in the 1800s. You'd have your porter, your stout porter, maybe your double stout, and then your strongest would be the imperial stout.
Yeah.
So it's the absolute strongest, and that comes from from some marketeers trying to make the most of the fact that some of those stouts went over to the Russians, the Russian oligarchs. But imperial means the strongest of it. So if you're using imperial pale ale, then it should be the strongest thing you make. Which, that could kind of work. But really, India, for better or for worse, probably for worse, has become known as this is very, very hoppy. So you can put it in front of different styles and people will understand that. Like we've got India Pale Lager. We've got India Porter actually probably was a thing. There were more porter went to India than any pale ales. So actually India Porter, or Porter as prepared for India as it would have been known, is actually much more, makes more historical sense than IPA. So yeah, I can't agree that we should sub out India for Imperial, because A, it could be misleading. It might not be the strongest one you make because of dipper, tipper. And then B, because these beers, these IPAs, these India Pale Ales in America were based off of British recipes originally, so it keeps that lineage going, I guess.
Yeah, I think it has to, right? I mean, otherwise it just becomes incredibly confusing. How can you can't also enforce a name change across an industry?
Just the practicality of it is tricky.
I mean, like IPA is probably the most requested, most drunk craft beer style pretty much everywhere in the world. Every single year, Johnny. We always say it's going to be the year of the lager or something, but it's always year of the IPA. So, to sort of fundamentally go, oh, no. Sorry, now, boys and girls, you've got to call it Imperial Pale Ale. It just wouldn't fly.
It'd be fun to watch us try, though.
I'm not sure I want to throw my weight behind that campaign.
Okay, well, yeah, so if the revolution's coming, it's not going to come from the Craft Beer channel. Jordan, I hope that answers your questions. We will come to you next week to answer your question about beer storage, beer aging, beer temperatures, and dry corks. But yeah, we'll save that for next week. So on Wednesday, our next video is the final of that little series of homebrew tips. And then we've got some exciting episodes. We've got some homebrewing happening. We've got a video. We're going to be doing a video about Märzens and Oktoberfest, and then we'll be diving into the big secret project we've been teasing for a long time towards the end of September. So lots going on, lots of excitement, which is why we keep putting videos late and missing podcasts. But we're getting better about it again, I promise you. Every week, without fail, except some weeks, we will be here for your Friday 5 p.m. needs. Cool. Anything to add, Brad, or is it love and beer time?
Also, we forgot to say that we are doing a live show tomorrow night, aren't we, Johnny?
Oh my God.
It's too late to buy the beers, but if you want to, maybe you can go out and buy a few of them in a shop or just something similar to drink along with us, because we haven't done a live show in so long, and it would be nice to see all of you lovely people.
Yeah, absolutely. So the live shows with Unity Brewing, one of my favourite breweries in the UK. We've got an incredible beer list, which we announced on Twitter, so you might be able to try and track down some of them. But otherwise, just come with lagers, IPAs, sours, imperial porters. We've got it all going on. Start at 8 p.m. tomorrow. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can click on that. And it'll be a lot of fun. Jimmy's a really engaging, really interesting guy, so it should be a great live show. So yeah, 8 p.m. tomorrow night, Saturday night that is. We'll be going live on our YouTube channel for lots and lots of beers. So we'll see you then. Love and beer. The Bubble and Friday 5pm podcasts are brought to you by the nerds behind YouTube's Craft Beer channel. You can watch over 400 mini documentaries at youtube.com/The Craft Beer Channel. And if you love what we do, support us via Patreon and get access to merchandise and our amazing Discord forum, a positive and welcoming space for everyone who loves beer, food, and homebrewing. Love and beer.